wagon wheels creaked against the dried earth as dust devils danced across the Colorado Territory landscape. The sun hung low, painting the wooden roofs and cracked fields in shades of amber and rust. It was 1885, and the West was as unforgiving as the hearts of those who called it home. Clara Whitmore pressed herself against the rough wooden slats of the wagon bed, her fingers clutching a worn carpet bag that contained everything she owned. At 26, she should have been bouncing grandchildren on her knee, at least according to her mother's sharp tongue. Instead, she was being shipped off like damaged goods to settle a debt her father owed to Jonas Halden, a rancher who lived 3 days' ride from their homestead. "Stop your sniveling," her mother, Ruth Whitmore, snapped from the front of the wagon. "You've brought enough shame on this family already." Clara bit her lip, tasting blood mixed with the ever-present dust. She'd stopped crying 2 hours ago when they'd passed the last familiar landmark. What use were tears when your own kin treated you like a burden to be shed? Her younger sister, Mary, sat beside their mother, occasionally throwing pitying glances back at Clara. Mary, blessed Mary, who'd given her husband 3 sons in 4 years of marriage. Mary, who never failed to mention her fertility at every family gathering, as if children were badges of honor to be displayed. The Halden place is just over that ridge, their father, Thomas Whitmore, announced, his voice devoid of emotion. He hadn't looked at Clara since breakfast. When he'd informed her of the arrangement, "Jonas agreed to take you in exchange for clearing my debt. Consider yourself fortunate." Fortunate. Clara almost laughed at the bitter irony. 5 years of marriage to Samuel Morrison had produced nothing but monthly disappointments and increasingly cruel accusations. When Samuel had finally cast her out, returning her to her father's house like a defective purchase, the whispers had followed, barren, cursed, worthless. The wagon crested the hill, and Clara got her first glimpse of her new prison. The Halden Ranch sprawled across the valley, modest but well-maintained. A 2-story log house stood at its center, smoke curling from the chimney. Several outbuildings dotted the property, and she could see cattle grazing in the distance. Jonas Halden stood on the porch, a solitary figure against the darkening sky, even from a distance. Clara could see he was a large man, broad-shouldered and still. He didn't wave or acknowledge their approach, simply waited like a statue carved from the landscape itself. "Remember," Ruth hissed, turning to face Clara one last time. "You're lucky he's taking you at all. No decent man wants a woman who can't give him sons. You keep quiet, work hard, and maybe he'll let you stay." Clara's throat tightened, but she nodded. What choice did she have? Her family had made it clear she was no longer welcome, and a woman alone in the territory had few options, none of them good. The wagon rolled to a stop in front of the house. Jonas Halden stepped down from the porch, his boots hitting the dirt with solid thuds. Up close, Clara could see he was perhaps 10 years her senior, with weathered skin that spoke of long days under the harsh sun. His hair was dark, shot through with premature gray, and his eyes were the color of winter sky. "Thomas," Jonas said by way of greeting. His voice was deep, rougher than sandpaper. "Jonas!" Her father climbed down from the wagon, not offering to help Clara. "As we agreed, the debt is settled." Jonas's gaze shifted to Clara, and she forced herself not to shrink under his scrutiny. His expression revealed nothing, neither interest nor disgust, just a blank assessment. "Get your things," he said simply. Clara climbed down on unsteady legs, her skirts catching on the wagon's edge. Neither her parents nor Mary moved to help. She retrieved her carpet bag and a small trunk that contained her few possessions, some clothes, her mother's old sewing kit, and a Bible that had belonged to her grandmother. "Well then," Thomas said, already climbing back onto the wagon seat. "We'll be on our way. Gotta make camp before full dark." "Papa," Clara started, but the look he gave her killed the words in her throat. "You're not our concern anymore," Ruth said coldly. Mr. Halden's been generous enough to take you in. Don't give him cause to regret it." The wagon turned, and Clara watched her family leave without a backward glance. Mary didn't even wave. They disappeared over the ridge as quickly as they'd come, leaving her standing in the dusty yard with a stranger who now controlled her fate. "Supper's on the stove," Jonas said, breaking the silence. "You can have the room at the top of the stairs. Wash basin's out back if you want to clean up first." He turned and walked back into the house without waiting for a response. Clara stood frozen for a moment, the reality of her situation settling over her like a shroud. She was truly alone now, cast off by her family and dependent on the charity of a man who'd taken her to settle a gambling debt. The house was warmer than she'd expected, and surprisingly clean for a bachelor's residence. The main room served as both kitchen and living area, with a large stone fireplace dominating one wall. A pot of stew bubbled on the iron stove, filling the air with the scent of beef and vegetables. Jonas sat at a rough-hewn table, already eating. He gestured to a second bowl he'd set out. "Sit, eat." Clara sat, though her stomach churned with anxiety. The stew was good, better than anything her mother had made in recent months. They ate in silence. The only sounds, the clink of spoons against bowls and the pop of wood in the fireplace. "I don't need a wife," Jonas said suddenly, making Clara jump. "Had one. She died. Don't need another." Clara's cheeks burned. I'm not expecting..." "You'll keep house, help with the chickens and garden. In return, you get room and board. That's all." "Yes, sir." "Jonas! Just Jonas!" He stood, leaving his empty bowl on the table. "I rise at dawn. Breakfast should be ready by then. There's a list of supplies in the pantry. You'll go to town once a week for what we need." He paused at the stairs leading to what Clara assumed were his quarters. "Whatever happened before, with your family, your marriage, that's your business. Don't bring trouble to my door, and we'll get along fine." Clara nodded, unable to trust her voice. Jonas disappeared upstairs, leaving her alone in the kitchen. She cleaned the dishes, familiarizing herself with where things were kept. Everything had its place, organized with military precision. Her room was small but clean, with a narrow bed, a dresser, and a single window that looked out over the ranch. Someone, Jonas, she supposed, had left fresh linens on the bed and a lamp on the dresser. It was more consideration than her own family had shown. Clara unpacked her few belongings, hanging her dresses on pegs along the wall. At the bottom of her trunk, wrapped in tissue paper, was her wedding dress. She didn't know why she'd kept it. Perhaps some foolish hope that things might have worked out differently. She shoved it back in the trunk, burying it beneath winter shawls she'd likely need soon. That night, lying in the narrow bed, Clara stared at the ceiling and listened to the unfamiliar sounds of the house. She could hear Jonas moving in his room, the creak of floorboards under his weight. Outside, cattle lowed in the distance, and coyotes howled at the rising moon. She thought of her family, probably camped somewhere along the trail, sharing stories around the fire. Did they spare even a moment's thought for her, or was she already forgotten, erased from their lives like a mistake in a ledger? Her hand moved unconsciously to her flat stomach. 5 years of trying, of monthly hopes dashed, of invasive questions from well-meaning church ladies and cruel taunts from Samuel. The doctor in town had examined her and found nothing wrong, but that hadn't stopped the whispers. A woman who couldn't bear children was seen as broken, cursed by God or lacking in some fundamental way. Clara turned onto her side, pulling the quilts up to her chin. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new routines to learn. She'd have to go to town eventually, face the curious stares and inevitable gossip. A woman living with a man who wasn't her husband, even in a business arrangement, would set tongues wagging. But for tonight, she was simply grateful for a roof over her head and a bed to sleep in. Jonas Halden might be cold and distant, but he hadn't looked at her with the disgust she'd seen in her mother's eyes or the disappointment in her father's. She closed her eyes, listening to the wind rattle the windows. Somewhere in the house, a clock chimed midnight. Her old life was behind her now, severed as cleanly as if cut with a knife. What lay ahead was uncertain, but it couldn't be worse than what she'd left behind. As sleep finally took her, Clara's last thought was a prayer, not for a child, as she'd prayed for so many years, but simply for the strength to survive whatever tomorrow might bring. In the harsh landscape of the Colorado Territory, survival itself was its own form of hope. The moon continued its path across the sky, casting silver light through her window, and somewhere in the darkness, a screech owl called out, a lonely sound that echoed the ache in Clara's chest. She was alone now, truly alone. But perhaps that was better than being surrounded by people who saw her only as a disappointment. Tomorrow, she would begin again. Tomorrow, she would prove that she was more than just a barren woman, more than a debt to be settled. Tomorrow, she would start building a new life, even if it was just as Jonas Halden's housekeeper. But tonight, she allowed herself just a few tears on the pillow, mourning the life that should have been and the family that had thrown her away like chaff in the wind. Winter came early to the Colorado Territory that year, bringing with it bitter winds that cut through even the thickest wool. Clara had been at the Halden Ranch for 3 months now, and the routine of her days had settled into a predictable rhythm. Rise before dawn, prepare breakfast, tend to the chickens, work the vegetable garden until it froze, mend clothes, prepare meals, clean, sleep, repeat. Jonas remained as distant as that first night, speaking only when necessary. Their conversations were limited to practical matters, supplies needed from town, repairs required around the ranch, the health of the livestock. He ate her meals without complaint, left money for supplies without comment, and maintained a careful distance that might have been respectful or simply indifferent. Clara had grown used to the silence, after years of Samuel's cruel words and her mother's sharp tongue. Jonas's quiet was almost peaceful. She could work without fear of criticism, think without interruption, exist without constantly defending her worth. The first snow fell on a Tuesday morning, thick flakes that transformed the ranch into something from a fairy tale. Clara stood at the kitchen window, mesmerized by the way the world disappeared beneath a blanket of white. She didn't hear Jonas enter until he cleared his throat. "Storm's going to last a few days," he said, setting an armload of firewood by the stove. "I brought in extra wood. You'll need to keep the fires going." Clara noticed his hands were red with cold, the knuckles cracked and bleeding. Without thinking, she reached for the jar of salve she kept for kitchen burns. "Your hands," she said quietly. Jonas pulled back as if burned. "They're fine." "They're bleeding." She held out the salve. "Please." For a moment, he just stared at her, those winter sky eyes unreadable. Then, slowly, he extended his hands. Clara worked the salve into the damaged skin, trying not to notice how his hands dwarfed hers, or the calluses that spoke of years of hard labor. "Thank you," he said gruffly when she finished, flexing his fingers. He grabbed his coat and headed back out into the storm before Clara could respond. That small moment of connection sustained her through the long days of confinement as the blizzard raged. She kept herself busy with indoor tasks, organizing the pantry, patching worn clothing, even starting a quilt from scraps she found in a trunk in the attic. On the third day of the storm, she discovered Jonas's collection of books. They were stored in a wooden crate in the main room, covered with an old blanket. Classic works mixed with agricultural guides and even a few novels. Clara ran her fingers over the spines reverently. She hadn't had access to books since leaving her family home. "You can read them." Clara jumped, clutching a copy of Jane Eyre to her chest. Jonas stood in the doorway, snow still clinging to his coat. "I didn't mean to pry," she said quickly, moving to put the book back. "I said you can read them." His voice was softer than usual. Margaret loved books. Brought most of those with her when we married. It was the first time he'd mentioned his late wife by name. Clara held the book carefully, understanding its significance. "Thank you," she whispered. The storm finally broke on the fourth day, leaving behind a world transformed. Jonas was out before dawn, checking on the cattle, breaking ice on water troughs, ensuring none of the herd had been lost. Clara watched from the window as he worked, a solitary figure against the white landscape. That afternoon, she ventured outside to tend the chickens. The cold was brutal, stealing her breath and numbing her fingers within minutes. She was scattering feed when she slipped on hidden ice, landing hard on her hip. Pain shot through her side as she struggled to stand. "What are you doing?" Jonas appeared beside her, lifting her to her feet with surprising gentleness. "The chickens can wait. You're hurt?" He half carried her back to the house, his arms solid around her waist. "Where?" "My hip, it's just bruised." He deposited her in a chair by the fire. "Ice is treacherous. Should have warned you." He actually looked concerned, a crack in his usual stoic demeanor. "I'll finish with the chickens." While he was gone, Clara tested her hip, relieved to find she could walk, though with a pronounced limp. By the time Jonas returned, she had hot coffee waiting. "Better?" he asked, accepting the cup gratefully. "Yes, thank you for helping me." He studied her over the rim of his cup. "You don't complain much." Clara wasn't sure how to respond to that. "Would it change anything if I did?" "No, but most would anyway." He set down his cup. Margaret complained, not about important things, just little things, the cold, the isolation, the work. His voice held no bitterness, just remembered sadness. She wasn't made for this life. May I ask how she died? Fever, 3 winters ago. Jonas stared into the fire. Doctor said her body was too weak, worn down from trying to adapt to what she wasn't suited for. Clara understood then that his distance wasn't coldness, but self-protection. He'd brought a woman he loved to this harsh place and watched it kill her. No wonder he kept her at arm's length. "I'm stronger than I look," she said quietly. Jonas met her eyes then, really looked at her for perhaps the first time since she'd arrived. "Maybe you are." Over the following weeks, something shifted between them. Jonas still didn't say much, but his silence became companionable rather than cold. He started leaving small tokens of consideration, a new pair of work gloves sized for her hands, a warmer cloak to replace her thin one, fresh eggs from town for baking. Clara responded in kind, learning his preferences without being told. Strong coffee at dawn, stew with extra potatoes, his work shirts mended before he had to ask. She caught him smiling once when he found his boots cleaned and oiled by the door. The day finally came when she had to go to town for supplies. Clara had been dreading it, knowing the gossip that would surely follow her. Jonas surprised her by announcing he'd accompany her. "Don't usually go to town this time of month," he said, helping her into the wagon. "But the roads are still icy, not safe alone." Cedar Creek was typical of small frontier towns. One main street lined with essential businesses, a church at one end, saloons at the other. Clara kept her head high as they drove down the street, aware of curtains twitching and heads turning. Their first stop was Patterson's General Store. Mrs. Patterson, a thin woman with sharp features and sharper tongue, greeted them with barely concealed curiosity. "Mr. Halden, and this must be—" She let the sentence hang, waiting for an introduction that didn't come. "We need supplies," Jonas said flatly, handing Clara the list. "The lady will select what's needed." Clara moved through the store, gathering items while trying to ignore Mrs. Patterson's scrutiny and the whispers of other shoppers. She was reaching for a sack of flour when she heard a familiar voice that made her blood run cold. Well, Clara Morrison, Or is it Whitmore again? She turned to find Miriam Crowley, her former husband's cousin, standing with two other women. Miriam's smile was sharp as a blade. "Mrs. Crowley," Clara said quietly, hoping to avoid a scene. "We heard Samuel cast you off. Such a shame, though hardly surprising." Miriam's voice carried through the store. "A woman who can't provide children. Well, what use is she?" Clara's hands clenched on the shopping basket. She felt the familiar shame rising, the old wounds tearing open. "Though I see you found someone else to take you in." Miriam's eyes glittered with malice. "How convenient for you. Though one wonders what arrangement." "That's enough." Jonas's voice cut through the store like a whip crack. He stood behind Clara, solid and imposing, his face carved from stone. "Mr. Halden," Miriam stammered, "I was just—" "Leaving. You were just leaving." His tone brooked no argument. "And you'll keep your poisonous tongue to yourself when it comes to anyone under my protection." Miriam flushed red but gathered her companions and swept out of the store. The other shoppers suddenly found their own business very interesting. Clara's hands shook as she finished gathering supplies. Jonas took the basket from her, paid Mrs. Patterson without a word, and guided Clara back to the wagon. They were halfway home before Clara found her voice. "Thank you." "No one speaks to you that way," Jonas said, his jaw still tight with anger. "Not while you're with me." "She wasn't wrong, though." The words spilled out before Clara could stop them. "I couldn't give Samuel children. 5 years of trying, and nothing. That's why he sent me back. That's why my family—" She stopped, unable to continue. Jonas pulled the wagon to a halt. "Look at me." Clara raised her eyes reluctantly. "A woman's worth isn't measured by her womb," he said firmly. "You work harder than any hand I've hired. You've made that house a home again. You've survived what would break most people. That's worth more than anything Miriam Crowley or anyone else says." Tears burned Clara's eyes. It was the longest speech she'd heard from him, and the kindness in it nearly undid her. "Samuel said I was broken, that I was cursed. Samuel was a fool." Jonas clicked to the horses, starting them moving again. "And so was your family for believing it." That night, Clara found a package on her bed. Inside was a new dress, simple but well made, in a deep blue that would complement her coloring. There was no note, but she knew who had left it. She wore it to dinner, feeling self-conscious. Jonas looked up when she entered, and something flickered in his eyes. Appreciation, maybe, or simply acknowledgement. "Thank you for the dress," she said, serving the meal. "You needed something warmer," he said gruffly. "That's all." But Clara saw the way his eyes lingered on her throughout dinner, and for the first time in years, she felt like a woman rather than a failure. It was a dangerous feeling, one she tried to suppress. She was here because Jonas needed a housekeeper. Nothing more. To hope for anything else would only lead to more heartbreak. Still, as she cleaned up after dinner, she found herself humming, something she hadn't done since the early days of her marriage. Jonas sat by the fire, carving something from a piece of wood, the lamplight playing over his weathered features. "What are you making?" she asked, curious despite herself. He held up the piece, a small wooden horse, already taking shape despite its rough state. "Thought I'd leave some toys at the church, for the Christmas charity box." Clara's heart clenched. This hard, silent man was carving toys for children he'd never meet. She thought of the dreams she'd once had, of children of her own to make toys for, to hold and love and raise. The familiar pain rose, but for once it didn't consume her. "That's kind of you," she managed. Jonas shrugged. Every child should have something at Christmas. They sat in companionable silence then, Jonas carving while Clara worked on her quilt. The fire crackled. The wind howled outside. But inside the small house, there was warmth and peace. For the first time since arriving at the ranch, Clara allowed herself to think that maybe, just maybe, she could build something here. Not the life she'd planned or the family she'd dreamed of, but something real and solid nonetheless. As the clock chimed 9, Jonas set aside his carving and stood. "Best get some rest. Long day tomorrow." "Good night, Jonas." He paused at the stairs, looking back at her. "Good night, Clara." It was the first time he'd wished her good night, and the simple courtesy warmed her more than the fire. She worked on her quilt a while longer, thinking about the unexpected turns life could take. She'd been cast out as worthless, shipped off to settle a debt, but somehow she'd found a place where she could simply be. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges. There would be more trips to town, more encounters with those who knew her shame. But tonight, she was safe and warm and, if not valued, at least protected. As she finally made her way to bed, Clara thought she heard Jonas moving around upstairs, the floorboards creaking under his weight. She wondered if he, too, lay awake thinking about the strange partnership they'd formed. Two damaged souls trying to survive in a harsh land. The wind picked up outside, rattling the windows, but the house stood strong against it. Like Jonas himself, Clara thought weathered and scarred but unbroken. She pulled her quilts up to her chin and closed her eyes, feeling safer than she had in years. Spring arrived slowly, melting the snow to reveal muddy fields and the promise of new growth. Clara had been at the Halden Ranch for 6 months now, and the rhythm of her life had found a comfortable pattern. The house ran smoothly under her care, and even Jonas had remarked on how well she managed everything. But as the weather warmed and trips to town became more frequent, the whispers grew louder. Clara tried to ignore them, focusing on her shopping lists and necessary tasks. But the weight of judgment pressed down on her shoulders like a physical burden. It was on a particularly fine April morning that everything came to a head. Clara had gone to town alone. Jonas was busy with calving season and couldn't spare the time. She'd finished at Patterson's and was loading supplies into the wagon when she heard the voices. "There she is, the barren one." The words carried across the street, followed by cruel laughter. "Living in sin with Jonas Halden now. My cousin says she tried every remedy known to woman." Another voice added. "Nothing worked, empty as a broken well." Clara's hands trembled as she lifted a sack of flour. The women weren't even trying to lower their voices. She recognized them, wives of local ranchers, pillars of the church community. Jonas Halden must be desperate for a housekeeper to take in Samuel Morrison's cast-off. The first woman continued, though what else she might be providing. The sack slipped from Clara's numb fingers, splitting open on the wagon bed. Flour exploded in a white cloud, covering her dress and face. The women's laughter rang out like bells. "Can't even manage simple tasks," someone observed. "No wonder she couldn't manage the simplest woman's duty." Clara stood frozen, flour in her hair, tears burning her eyes. She couldn't move, couldn't breathe, couldn't think beyond the crushing weight of their words. "Is there a problem here?" The masculine voice cut through the laughter. Reverend Thompson stood nearby, his kind face creased with concern. "No problem, Reverend," one of the women said sweetly, just observing how some people can't seem to manage even basic tasks. "I see." The Reverend's voice was mild, but his eyes were sharp. Perhaps those with perfect lives might show Christian charity to those struggling with life's burdens. The women had the grace to look slightly ashamed before hurrying away. Reverend Thompson helped Clara clean the worst of the flour from her clothes. "Don't let their poison touch your heart, child," he said gently. "God's plans aren't always what we expect." Clara managed to thank him, but his kindness almost made things worse. She drove home in a daze, the ruined flour sack a white flag of surrender in the wagon bed. By the time she reached the ranch, she was shaking. She unhitched the horses with mechanical precision, unloaded the supplies, and went about preparing dinner. But her hands wouldn't stop trembling, and when she dropped the third dish, it shattered on the floor like her composure. Clara sank to her knees among the broken pieces, sobs tearing from her throat. 6 months of held-back tears poured out as she crouched on the kitchen floor, mourning everything she'd lost and would never have. She didn't hear Jonas come in until his boots appeared in her field of vision. Without a word, he knelt beside her, gathering her into his arms. Clara stiffened, then collapsed against his chest, crying harder. "What happened?" His voice was rough with concern. Between sobs, the story poured out. The women in town, their cruel words, the constant reminder of her failure as a woman. Jonas listened in silence, his arms tightening around her. "I'm sorry," Clara gasped, trying to pull away. "I'm being foolish." "No." Jonas's voice was firm. "You're being human." He helped her to her feet, guided her to a chair. "Stay here." He cleaned up the broken dish, then poured 2 glasses of whiskey from a bottle Clara didn't know he kept. He pressed one into her hands. "Drink," he ordered. "It'll help." The whiskey burned, but it did steady her nerves. Jonas sat across from her, his own glass untouched. "Tell me about your marriage," he said quietly, "if you can." Clara stared into her glass. She'd never spoken about it in detail to anyone, but something in Jonas's steady presence made her feel safe. "Samuel was handsome," she began slowly. "Charming. He courted me properly, said all the right things. My parents were thrilled. He came from a good family, had prospects." She took another sip of whiskey. "The first year was fine. We were happy enough. But when no children came..." Her voice trailed off. Jonas waited patiently. "He changed, became angry, cold, said terrible things, made me see doctors who..." She couldn't finish that sentence. Nothing helped. By the 3rd year, he wouldn't even look at me. By the 5th, he was done pretending. He took me back to my father's house like returning defective merchandise. "And your family were ashamed. A daughter who couldn't provide grandchildren was worthless to them. When your debt came due..." She laughed bitterly. "They were relieved to have an excuse to be rid of me." Jonas was quiet for a long moment. Then he stood, moving to the window that overlooked the ranch. "Margaret and I tried for children too," he said, his back to her. 3 years. She lost 2 before they could draw breath. The trying, the losing, it wore her down, made her frail. When the fever came, she had no strength left to fight it. Clara's heart ached for him. "I'm sorry." He turned back to her. "I blamed myself for years. If I hadn't wanted children so badly, maybe she wouldn't have pushed her body so hard. Maybe she'd still be alive." "You can't know that." "No, just like you can't know why your body won't do what others do so easily." He sat back down, finally taking a drink of his whiskey. "But I learned something in these 3 years alone. A person's worth isn't in what they can produce. Children, crops, cattle. It's in who they are." Clara felt fresh tears threaten. "The whole town thinks..." "The town can hang," Jonas said flatly. "Their opinions don't keep this ranch running. Their whispers don't put food on our table or tend the stock. You do that." "I'm tired," Clara admitted. "Tired of being seen as broken. Tired of defending my existence. Tired of apologizing for something beyond my control." Jonas reached across the table, covering her flour-dusted hand with his. "Then stop. Stop apologizing. Stop defending. Just live." That night, Clara couldn't eat. She went through the motions of serving dinner, but Jonas noticed her full plate. "You need to eat," he said. "I can't. My stomach..." She gestured helplessly. He studied her for a moment, then stood. "Come with me." Confused, Clara followed him outside. The sun was setting, painting the sky in brilliant oranges and purples. Jonas led her to the barn, where the new calves were penned with their mothers. "Look," he said, pointing to one corner. A small calf stood on wobbly legs, its mother licking it clean. The calf was clearly the runt. smaller than the others, but it was determinedly trying to nurse. "Born this morning," Jonas said. "Didn't think it would make it. Too small, too weak. But look at it fight." Clara watched the little calf struggle to stay on its feet, falling and getting back up again and again. "Some might say it's not worth saving," Jonas continued. "Won't grow as big as the others, might always be weaker, but it's alive, it's fighting. That has to count for something." Clara understood what he was trying to say. She reached out tentatively to pet the calf's soft head. "What will you name it?" "That's up to you." She looked at him in surprise. "Me?" "It's your calf now. Figured you two might understand each other." Clara felt something crack open in her chest. Not breaking, but maybe letting light in. "Hope," she said softly. "I'll call her Hope." They stood together watching the calves until full dark, neither speaking. But the silence was different now, full of understanding rather than distance. That night, Clara found she could eat a little, and when she went to bed, she didn't cry herself to sleep for the first time in weeks. The next morning brought rain, a steady spring shower that would green the fields. Clara made breakfast as usual, but there was something different in the air between her and Jonas, a warmth that had nothing to do with the stove. "I need to go to town today," Jonas announced. "Will you come?" Clara's stomach clenched. "I don't know if I can face them again so soon." "You won't be alone," he said simply. So she went, sitting beside Jonas on the wagon seat instead of in the back. When they reached town, he helped her down with a hand at her elbow. A small gesture, but one that spoke volumes to those watching. At Patterson's, Mrs. Patterson's eyes widened at seeing them together. Jonas kept close to Clara as she shopped, his presence a silent shield against whispers. They were nearly finished when Miriam Crowley entered with her usual entourage, her eyes lit up with malicious glee at seeing Clara. "Why, Clara, back so soon? Though I suppose when you're living on charity, you take what you can." "Mrs. Crowley." Jonas's voice was deadly quiet. "I believe I made myself clear last time about your behavior toward Miss Whitmore." "I'm simply concerned about propriety," Miriam said with false sweetness. "An unmarried woman living with a man is working as my housekeeper, with proper wages and quarters, unless you're suggesting something improper." His tone carried a warning that made Miriam step back. "Of course not. Then there's nothing more to discuss." Jonas turned to Clara. "Are you finished here?" Clara nodded, not trusting her voice. As they left the store, she heard Jonas speak once more to Miriam. "By the way, I heard your husband's been spending considerable time at the Golden Dollar Saloon. Perhaps you should focus on your own household before concerning yourself with mine." Miriam's face went white, then red. She fled the store without another word. Outside, Clara looked up at Jonas in wonder. "How did you know about her husband?" "I listen. People think because I'm quiet, I'm not paying attention." He helped her into the wagon. Sometimes the most righteous have the most to hide. On the ride home, Clara felt something she hadn't experienced in months, a spark of her old spirit. "Thank you for defending me. Again." "You don't need defending," Jonas said. "You need people to see you for who you are, not what they think you lack." That evening, as Clara served dinner, she found herself actually hungry. The food tasted better. The lamplight seemed warmer, and when Jonas complimented her cooking, she felt a flutter in her chest she'd thought dead forever. After dinner, she worked on her quilt while Jonas carved another toy. The silence between them was comfortable now, broken only by the crackle of the fire and the whisper of wood shavings falling to the floor. "I've been thinking," Jonas said suddenly, "about what you said, being tired." Clara looked up from her stitching. "Maybe it's time to stop letting others define you," he continued, not looking up from his carving. You're not a barren woman or a cast-off wife or a debt settlement. You're Clara. That should be enough."
"Is it enough?"
she asked softly.
"For you?"
His hand stilled on the wood.
"More than enough."
Their eyes met across the room, and something passed between them. Understanding, acceptance, maybe even the beginning of something deeper. Clara felt her cheeks warm and returned to her sewing, but a small smile played at her lips. That night, before bed, she went to check on Hope. The little calf was thriving, stronger already despite her small size. Clara stroked the soft nose, thinking about fighters and survivors and second chances.
"We're going to be fine, aren't we?"
she whispered to the calf.
"Both of us."
When she returned to the house, she found Jonas still awake, standing by the window. "Storm coming," he said, pointing to the lightning flickering on the horizon. "We've weathered storms before," Clara replied. And they both knew she wasn't talking about the weather. Jonas turned to her, and for a moment, she thought he might say something more, but he simply nodded and headed for the stairs. "Good night, Clara." "Good night, Jonas." As she prepared for bed, Clara realized the crushing weight she'd carried for so long had lifted slightly. The whispers would continue. The judgment wouldn't disappear overnight. But she had an ally now, someone who saw her worth beyond her womb. Thunder rolled across the plains as the storm arrived, but Clara felt safer than she had in years. The little house stood strong against the wind and rain, just as she was learning to stand strong against the storms of judgment and shame. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but tonight, she was not alone. And that, she thought as she drifted off to sleep, made all the difference. The summer sun beat down mercilessly on Cedar Creek as Clara made her way down Main Street. 8 months had passed since she'd arrived at the Halden Ranch, and while she'd grown accustomed to the whispers and stares, they still stung. Today, however, the town was buzzing with different energy, preparation for the annual Founders' Day celebration. Clara clutched her shopping list tighter, hoping to finish her errands quickly and return to the ranch's peaceful solitude. She just exited Patterson's store when she heard it, a child's terrified scream cutting through the busy street noise. Without thinking, Clara dropped her packages and ran toward the sound. A small boy, perhaps 4 years old, stood frozen in the middle of the street as a runaway freight wagon barreled toward him. The driver had lost control, the horses wild with panic. Time seemed to slow. Clara heard shouts, saw people pointing, but no one moved to help. She didn't remember deciding to act. One moment she was on the sidewalk. The next she was sprinting into the street. She grabbed the boy, pulling him against her chest and diving sideways just as the wagon thundered past. They hit the ground hard, rolling in the dust. Clara curled her body around the child, protecting him from the worst of the impact. "Tommy! Oh God, Tommy!" A woman's hysterical voice pierced through the ringing in Clara's ears. She looked down at the boy in her arms. Dusty and scared, but unharmed, he clung to her neck, sobbing.
"Shh, it's all right,"
Clara heard herself saying, rocking him gently.
"You're safe now. Mama's here. I've got you."
The words came without thought, pulled from some deep place within her. The boy's sobs quieted to hiccups as she stroked his hair, murmuring comfort.
"Mama's got you now. You're safe, little one. Mama's here."
"My baby, give me my baby." The boy's actual mother reached them, tears streaming down her face. Clara's mind cleared, reality crashing back. She loosened her hold, but the boy clung tighter.
"It's all right,"
Clara said softly to the child.
"Your real mama's here now. You can go to her."
Reluctantly, the boy allowed himself to be transferred to his mother's arms. The woman, Mrs. Douglas. Clara recognized her now, clutched her son desperately.
"Thank you," she gasped. "Oh, thank you. You saved him. You saved my Tommy."
A crowd had gathered, their faces showing a mix of awe and something else, respect. Clara struggled to her feet, suddenly aware of her torn dress and scraped palms. "Are you hurt, Miss Whitmore?" "Doctor." Hawkins appeared at her elbow, already reaching for her hands. "I'm fine," Clara said, though her body was starting to register the pain. "Just scratches." "That was the bravest thing I've ever seen," someone in the crowd said. Others murmured agreement. Clara looked up to see Jonas pushing through the crowd, his face tight with concern. He'd been at the blacksmith's and must have heard the commotion. "Clara." He reached her in 2 strides, his eyes scanning for injuries. "What happened?" "She saved the Douglas boy." "Doctor," Hawkins explained, still examining Clara's palms. "Threw herself right in front of that runaway wagon." Jonas's jaw tightened. Without a word, he scooped Clara into his arms. "Jonas," she protested, acutely aware of the watching crowd. "I can walk." "Hush." His voice brooked no argument. "Doc, I'm taking her home. Come by the ranch if you think she needs tending." He carried her to their wagon, setting her on the seat as carefully as if she were made of glass. The crowd parted respectfully, and Clara noticed something remarkable. Not a single person whispered about impropriety. Even Miriam Crowley, standing near the millinery shop, stayed silent. Jonas retrieved Clara's dropped packages and climbed up beside her. As they drove out of town, Clara became aware she was trembling. "That was foolish," Jonas said quietly. "You could have been killed." "The boy was lucky you were there, but Clara..." His hands tightened on the reins. "When I saw you on the ground, not moving..." "I'm sorry I frightened you." "Frightened?" He gave a short laugh. "I was terrified." They rode in silence until they reached the ranch. Jonas helped her down, his hands lingering at her waist. "Let me see your palms." Clara showed him the scrapes. They weren't deep, but gravel was embedded in the skin. Jonas led her inside and gently cleaned the wounds, his touch infinitely careful. "When you held that boy," he said softly, not looking at her face, "you called yourself Mama." Clara's breath caught. "I didn't realize." "It came from your heart." He finished bandaging one hand and started on the other. "I watched your face. For a moment, you were holding the child you've always wanted." Tears slipped down Clara's cheeks. "It's foolish. I'm a grown woman who should have accepted my fate by now." "There's nothing foolish about wanting to love and be loved." Jonas finished the second bandage, but didn't release her hand. "That boy was lucky you were there. Any child would be lucky to have you as a mother. But I can't birth them yourself. That doesn't mean you can't be a mother." He finally looked at her face. "There are other ways to build a family." "Clara." Before she could respond, he stood abruptly and left the room. Clara heard him rummaging in the storage room. He returned carrying something wrapped in cloth. "I made this," he said gruffly, unwrapping the object. "Don't know why, just seemed right." It was a wooden doll, beautifully carved with delicate features and jointed limbs. The craftsmanship was exquisite, clearly the work of many patient hours. "Jonas!" Clara breathed, taking the doll with reverent hands. "She's beautiful." "Thought maybe... well, if you wanted her." Clara clutched the doll to her chest, understanding the gift for what it was. Acknowledgement of her maternal heart, acceptance of her grief, and perhaps something more. "Thank you," she whispered. That evening, as Clara prepared dinner despite Jonas's protests that she should rest, she found herself humming again. Her hands ached, her body was sore, but her heart felt lighter than it had in years. "I've been thinking," Jonas said over dinner, "about what happened today." Clara looked up from her plate. "The way people looked at you, with respect, like they finally saw who you really are. They were just grateful." "No." Jonas shook his head. "It was more than that. You showed them your true character, Brave, selfless, protective. Everything a mother should be, whether she has children or not. Clara felt warmth spread through her chest.
Do you really think so?
I know so. He paused, seeming to wrestle with something. Clara, these past months, you've brought life back to this house. To me, I know I hired you as a housekeeper, but somewhere along the way, you became more. Clara's heart began to race.
Jonas!
He stood abruptly, pacing to the window. I'm not good with words. Margaret always said I was too quiet, too closed off. But I need you to know, I care for you, more than I should, more than I have any right to.
Why don't you have a right to?
Clara asked softly, standing as well. Because you deserve better than a broken-down rancher who can't even promise you the children you want. Clara crossed to him, placing a gentle hand on his arm.
What if what I want has changed? What if I've learned there are different kinds of families, different kinds of love?
Jonas turned to face her, his eyes searching hers. What are you saying? I'm saying that this house feels like home, that cooking your meals and mending your clothes and sharing quiet evenings by the fire has become precious to me. That when you carried me today, I felt safe, cherished, like I belonged.
Clara.
His voice was rough with emotion. I'm saying that maybe we're both broken in different ways, but maybe our broken pieces fit together. Jonas cupped her face in his calloused hands. You deserve to be loved. Clara Whitmore, fully and completely, just as you are. Then love me, she whispered. He kissed her then, gentle and reverent, as if she were something precious. Clara melted into him, feeling years of pain and rejection wash away in the warmth of his embrace. When they finally parted, both were breathing unsteadily. Jonas rested his forehead against hers. This changes things, he said.
Yes, Clara agreed. Is that all right?
More than all right. He pulled her close again. But Clara, I need you to understand. I can't promise you children. I won't put you through what Margaret went through, watching you suffer trying for something that might never come. I understand. And she did. Today, holding that little boy, it hurt, knowing I'll never hold my own. But it also felt right, protecting him, comforting him. Maybe that's enough. Maybe there are other ways to use this love I have to give. Jonas kissed her forehead. You have the biggest heart of anyone I've known. They stood together as darkness fell outside, holding each other in the kitchen where so many quiet moments had built into something beautiful. Stay with me tonight, Jonas said softly. Not for that, just to hold you, to know you're safe. Clara nodded, understanding. They were taking things slowly, building something solid and real. That night, she lay in Jonas's arms, feeling his heartbeat against her back, his breath warm on her neck. It wasn't the life she'd planned, but it was good and true, and hers. The next morning brought a surprise. Doctor. Hawkins arrived early, but not alone. Mrs. Douglas was with him, holding young Tommy's hand. I hope we're not intruding. Mrs. Douglas said. But Tommy insisted on seeing his angel lady again. The boy broke free, running to Clara and wrapping his arms around her skirts. Angel lady, he cried. You saved me. Clara knelt, gathering him close. Hello, little one. How are you feeling? Good, Mama says you're brave. Are you brave? Sometimes, Clara said, smiling. When someone needs help. Mrs. Douglas watched with soft eyes. I can never repay what you did, but I wanted you to know. The whole town's talking about it. About how you didn't hesitate, how you protected him, how you called yourself... She paused, clearly choosing her words carefully. How you comforted him like a mother would. Clara felt Jonas's supportive presence behind her. Anyone would have done the same. No, Mrs. Douglas said firmly. They wouldn't have.
And they didn't. You did. She hesitated, then added, I know people have said unkind things about you, about your situation, but anyone who thinks a woman's worth is only in birthing babies is a fool. You showed more maternal instinct yesterday than some mothers show in a lifetime. Tommy tugged on Clara's sleeve. Can I visit you, please? Clara looked up at Mrs. Douglas, who nodded. If you wouldn't mind, he's quite taken with you. I'd love that, Clara said, her voice thick with emotion. After they left, Jonas pulled Clara close. See different kinds of families. That afternoon, Jonas surprised her again. Put on your good dress. We're going back to town. But we were just there yesterday. Trust me. Confused, but curious, Clara did as asked. Jonas helped her into the wagon, and they drove back to Cedar Creek, but instead of stopping at the general store, he pulled up at the church. Reverend Thompson was waiting on the steps, smiling. Jonas, Miss Whitmore, right on time. On time for what? Clara asked. Jonas helped her down, keeping hold of her hand. Clara, I know this is sudden, maybe too sudden, but yesterday, when I thought I might lose you, I realized I don't want to waste another day. Clara's heart stopped. Jonas, what are you? He dropped to one knee right there on the church steps. Clara Whitmore, you came to my ranch as a housekeeper, but you became so much more. You brought warmth and life back to my home. You showed me it was possible to love again. Will you do me the honor of becoming my wife? Clara's hands flew to her mouth. Through her tears, she saw several townspeople had gathered, watching with surprisingly kind expressions. But Jonas, I can't give you... You've already given me everything I need, he said firmly. Your strength, your kindness, your brave heart. That's all I want. You, just as you are. Will you marry me? Yes, Clara whispered, then louder. Yes! Jonas slipped a simple gold band on her finger, then stood and kissed her soundly. The gathered crowd actually applauded. Today? Clara asked, dazed. You want to marry me today? If you're willing. I already spoke to the Reverend, but if you want to wait... No, Clara said quickly. No waiting. I've waited my whole life to feel like I belong somewhere. I don't want to wait another minute. The ceremony was simple and perfect. Word spread quickly, and by the time they exchanged vows, the church was half full. Mrs. Douglas served as witness, little Tommy holding the rings. Even some who had whispered cruelly before seemed touched by the obvious love between the couple. You may kiss your bride, Reverend Thompson announced, beaming. Jonas cradled Clara's face tenderly. My wife, he murmured before kissing her. As they walked back down the aisle as husband and wife, Clara noticed Miriam Crowley sitting in a back pew. For once, the woman's expression held no malice, only something that might have been regret. Outside the church, the townspeople offered congratulations. It seemed saving young Tommy had shifted their perception of her. Or perhaps it was Jonas's fierce protection. Or maybe, Clara thought, they finally saw her as she truly was, not a barren woman, but simply a woman, with all the complexities and worth that entailed. That night, in their home, truly their home now, Jonas carved while Clara worked on her quilt, now nearly complete, but they sat together on the small sofa, her head on his shoulder, his arm around her waist. No regrets, he asked softly. None, Clara assured him. This morning I woke a housekeeper. Tonight I sleep a wife. Tomorrow, who knows, but I'll face it with you. Jonas set aside his carving and turned to cradle her face. I love you, Clara Halden. Clara's heart soared at her new name. And I love you, Jonas. They sealed the promise with a kiss, gentle and full of hope for their future together. Outside, the stars wheeled overhead, witness to the strange paths that led broken people to wholeness, outcasts to belonging, and two lonely souls to love. The first weeks of marriage passed in a golden haze. Clara had never imagined such simple happiness, waking beside Jonas, sharing morning coffee, working side by side on the ranch. The tentative affection between them deepened into something solid and sure, built on mutual respect and growing intimacy. It was a warm evening in late summer when Clara first noticed Jonas watching her with particular intensity as she served dinner. His eyes followed her movements, lingering on the curve of her neck, the sway of her skirts. "Is something wrong?" she asked, setting down his plate. "No," he said, catching her hand. "Everything's right. Too right. Sometimes I can't believe you're real." Clara felt heat rise in her cheeks. "I'm real," she assured him, squeezing his fingers. After dinner, they sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant strokes. The evening was unusually warm, the breeze carrying the scent of late roses from the garden Clara had coaxed back to life. "Clara," Jonas said softly, "I need to ask you something." She turned to him, noting the serious set of his jaw. "What is it?" "Are you happy, truly happy, even knowing we might never, have children?" Clara finished gently. "Jonas, we've discussed this. I've made my peace with it." "Have you?" His eyes searched hers. "Because I see how you look when Tommy Douglas visits. The longing in your eyes." Clara was quiet for a moment, choosing her words carefully. "I won't lie and say the desire has gone away completely. But Jonas, what I have with you, this life, this love, it's more than I ever thought I'd have again. If children come, they come. If not," she took his face in her hands, "then I'll love you enough for a dozen children." Jonas pulled her onto his lap, holding her close. "You humble me," he murmured against her hair. They sat in comfortable silence as darkness fell, Clara secure in Jonas's arms. The night sounds of the ranch rose around them, cattle lowing, horses nickering, the distant call of an owl. "It's getting late," Clara finally said, though she made no move to rise. "We should go in." "Should we?" Jonas's voice had dropped deeper, and his hands tightened on her waist. Clara's pulse quickened. They'd shared a bed since their wedding day, but Jonas had been careful with her, patient. Now she heard a different note in his voice, felt a tension in his body that matched her own. "Jonas," she whispered. He stood suddenly, lifting her with him. "Tell me to put you down if this isn't what you want." "Don't put me down," she said breathlessly. He carried her inside, up the stairs to their bedroom. The lamp cast soft shadows as he set her on her feet beside the bed. His hands framed her face, thumbs stroking her cheekbones. "I love you, Clara Halden," he said reverently. "Show me," she whispered. That night, they came together with a passion born of long loneliness finally ended. Jonas was gentle but ardent, worshipping her with hands and lips until Clara felt beautiful, desired, whole, when they lay entwined afterward, both breathless and amazed. Clara felt something heal inside her that she hadn't even known was still broken. "Thank you," she whispered against his chest. "For what?" His voice was drowsy, satisfied. "For seeing me as a woman, not just a failed mother." Jonas tilted her chin up. "You're everything, Clara, everything." Summer turned to autumn, and their love deepened with each passing day. Clara threw herself into preparing for winter, canning vegetables from the garden, helping Jonas repair fences and shore up the barn. The work was hard but satisfying, and she'd never felt more useful. One crisp October morning, Clara woke feeling strange. Her stomach churned, and she barely made it to the wash basin before being sick. Jonas was already out checking the cattle, so she cleaned up and forced herself to prepare breakfast, though the smell of bacon made her queasy. "You're pale," Jonas observed when he came in. "Are you ill?" "Just tired," Clara said, not wanting to worry him. "I'll be fine." But the sickness continued for several mornings. Clara tried to hide it, but Jonas was too observant. He found her one morning crouched by the basin, miserable and shaking. "That's it," he declared. "I'm fetching Dr. Hawkins." "Jonas, no, it's just a stomach ailment." "Clara." His tone brooked no argument. "I'm going." Dr. Hawkins arrived within the hour, shooing Jonas out while he examined Clara. His questions were thorough but gentle, and when he finally sat back, his expression was carefully neutral. "Mrs. Halden," he said slowly, "when was your last monthly course?" Clara frowned, trying to remember. I'm not sure. They've always been irregular." "Why?" "Because unless I'm very much mistaken, you're with child." The world tilted. Clara gripped the edge of the bed. "That's impossible. I can't. I'm barren. 5 years of marriage proved that." "Bodies are mysterious things." "Doctor," Hawkins said kindly, "sometimes a change of circumstances, reduced stress, a different partner. I've seen it before. Women who couldn't conceive for years suddenly finding themselves expecting." "But are you certain?" "As certain as I can be at this stage. The sickness, the fatigue, the tenderness you mentioned. I'd say you're about 2 months along." Clara's hands flew to her still flat stomach. "A baby." "Barring complications. Yes, you'll need to be careful. Your age and history make this higher risk. But Clara," he smiled, "this is wonderful news." After he left, Clara sat in stunned silence. A baby. After all these years, all the pain and shame and resignation. A baby. Clara Jonas appeared in the doorway, his face tight with worry. "What did the doctor say? Are you ill?" She looked up at him, tears streaming down her face. "Jonas, I'm pregnant." He went absolutely still. "What?" "I'm going to have a baby. Our baby." The words felt foreign on her tongue. "I know it seems impossible, but the doctor said—" Jonas crossed the room in 2 strides and fell to his knees before her, his hands hovering over her stomach as if afraid to touch. "A baby." Are you happy?" Clara asked anxiously. "I know we said we'd accepted not having children, but—" "Happy." Jonas looked up at her with wonder. "Clara, His voice broke. "May I?" He gestured to her stomach. She took his hands and placed them on her belly. "There's nothing to feel yet, but our child is growing there." Jonas made a sound somewhere between a laugh and a sob, pressing his forehead to her stomach. "Our child," he repeated in awe. Clara ran her fingers through his hair, her own tears falling freely. "I'm scared," she admitted. "What if something goes wrong? What if I lose?" "Don't!" Jonas looked up fiercely. "Whatever happens, we'll face it together. But Clara, this is a gift, an unexpected, miraculous gift." He rose and kissed her deeply, tasting of tears and joy. When they parted, both were trembling. "I need to be careful," Clara said. "The doctor said it's higher risk because of my age and history." "Then we'll be careful. You'll rest more, no heavy lifting. I'll hire help if needed." Jonas cupped her face. "Whatever it takes to keep you and the baby safe." The baby. Clara marveled at the words. After years of being the barren one, she was carrying life. Over the following weeks, Jonas became almost comically protective. He insisted Clara rest frequently, took over the heavier household chores, and watched her like a hawk for any sign of distress. Clara found it both endearing and exasperating. "I'm pregnant, not made of glass," she protested one morning when he tried to prevent her from gathering eggs. "You're carrying precious cargo," he countered. "My wife and my child. I won't take chances." The morning sickness gradually eased, replaced by a radiant energy Clara had never experienced. Her body began to change, subtle swells and curves that Jonas traced with reverent hands. He talked to the baby every night, his deep voice rumbling against her belly as he told stories of the ranch and promised to be a good father. One evening, as the first snow began to fall, Clara felt a flutter in her womb. She gasped, hand flying to her stomach. "What is it?" Jonas was beside her instantly. "Are you in pain?" "No, I think the baby moved." She grabbed his hand, placing it where she'd felt the sensation. They waited breathlessly, and then there it was again, like butterfly wings. "I feel it," Jonas whispered, his eyes bright with unshed tears. "Our baby's saying hello." As winter deepened, word of Clara's pregnancy spread through Cedar Creek. The reaction was mixed. Some expressed joy, others skepticism. Miriam Crowley was particularly vocal in her doubts. "Mark my words, she's deceiving that poor man." Clara overheard her saying at Patterson's, "Barren women don't suddenly become fertile. She's probably—" "That's enough." The interruption came from an unexpected source. Mrs. Patterson herself. "I'll not have such talk in my store. Clara Halden is a good woman, and if the Lord has blessed her with a child, who are we to question it?" Clara felt a rush of gratitude for the unexpected support. As her pregnancy progressed and her condition became undeniable, more townspeople offered congratulations and support. Even some who had been coldest before seemed softened by the obvious joy on both Clara and Jonas's faces. Dr. Hawkins visited regularly, monitoring Clara's health carefully. "Everything looks good," he assured them after each visit. "The baby's growing well, and you're staying strong. Just continue to be careful." One night in late winter, Clara woke to find Jonas's side of the bed empty. She found him in what would be the nursery, assembling a cradle by lamplight. "Couldn't sleep?" she asked, leaning against the doorframe. He looked up with a sheepish smile. "Wanted to finish this. Been working on it for weeks." Clara moved closer, running her hand over the smooth wood. The cradle was beautiful, carved with delicate vines and flowers. In the center of the headboard was a small engraving, "Loved beyond measure." "It's perfect," she whispered, tears threatening. Jonas stood, pulling her carefully against him. "I want everything to be ready. I want our child to know from the first moment that they're wanted, cherished." "They will know," Clara assured him. "How could they not? With a father who stays up nights building cradles and a mother who thought she'd never get to be one." The baby kicked strongly, as if in agreement, and they both laughed. "Active little one," Jonas murmured, caressing her belly. "Going to be a handful." "I can't wait," Clara said honestly. As they stood in the nursery, snow falling softly outside, Clara marveled at the journey that had brought them here. From rejection and shame to love and new life. It seemed impossible. Yet here they were. "What are you thinking?" Jonas asked, noting her pensive expression. "About how different my life is from what I expected. If someone had told me a year ago that I'd be married to you, carrying our child, I would have thought them mad." "Disappointed." There was vulnerability in his voice. Clara turned in his arms, reaching up to touch his face. "Never. This life, this love, this baby, it's more than I dreamed possible. You gave me hope when I had none. Jonas, you saw me as more than my supposed defect. You loved me whole." "You made it easy," he said roughly. "You were always whole. Clara, others were just too blind to see it." The baby kicked again, and they both smiled. "I think someone's saying it's time for bed," Clara said. Jonas swept her into his arms, carrying her back to their room despite her laughing protests about being too heavy. As he settled her into bed and curved protectively around her, Clara felt complete in a way she never had before. "I love you," she whispered into the darkness. "And I love you," Jonas replied, his hand splayed possessively over where their child grew. "Both of you." Outside, winter held the land in its grip, but inside their home, warmth and love created a sanctuary.
The child Clara had thought she'd never have tumbled within her. Proof that sometimes life's greatest gifts come when least expected. To those who have learned to find joy beyond their deepest wounds. Spring arrived with Clara in her 7th month, her belly round and full beneath her modified dresses. The ranch bloomed with new life calves in the pasture, chicks in the henhouse, and green shoots pushing through the thawed earth. Everything seemed to celebrate the miracle growing within her. But with joy came fear. Clara woke often in the night, hands pressed to her stomach, terrified that this gift would be taken from her. The memory of her former mother-in-law's cruel words haunted her dreams, barren as a dead tree, cursed by God himself. "You're trembling again," Jonas murmured one night, pulling her close. "Talk to me." "What if they were right?" Clara whispered in the darkness. "What if I am cursed? What if I can't carry this baby to term?" Jonas lit the bedside lamp, needing to see her face. "Clara, look at me." She met his eyes reluctantly, seeing her fears reflected in his concern. "You are not cursed," he said firmly. "You are blessed. We are blessed. This child is strong. I feel it kick every day. And you're the strongest woman I know." "But I'm so afraid," she admitted, tears sliding down her cheeks. "I've wanted this for so long, and now that it's happening, I'm terrified of losing it." Jonas gathered her carefully against him, mindful of her expanded middle. "Fear is natural, but we can't let it steal our joy. Every day with you, with our child growing inside you, it's a gift. Let's not waste it on what might happen." Clara nodded against his chest, feeling the baby shift and kick as if in agreement. "You're right. I'm sorry for being so human." Jonas kissed her forehead. "Never apologize for that." The next morning brought unexpected visitors. Clara was hanging laundry when she heard horses approaching. Her blood ran cold when she recognized the riders, her parents and sister Mary. "Jonas!" she called, her voice tight with anxiety. He appeared from the barn immediately, taking in the situation with a glance, moving to Clara's side. He placed a protective hand on her lower back. Thomas Whitmore dismounted slowly, his eyes fixed on Clara's obvious condition. Ruth and Mary remained on their horses, staring with open shock. "Clara," Thomas said finally, "we heard rumors, came to see if they were true." "As you can see, they are," Jonas said coolly, "though I fail to see how it concerns you." Ruth found her voice. "But how is this possible? She's barren. The doctors said—" "The doctors were wrong," Clara said quietly, finding strength in Jonas's solid presence. "Sometimes miracles happen." "Miracles?" Ruth scoffed. "More likely deception. Who knows what—" "Careful," Jonas warned, his voice dangerous. "That's my wife and child you're speaking of." Mary finally spoke, her voice small. "You're really having a baby, Clara." Clara's hand moved protectively to her stomach. "Yes, due in 2 months, God willing." Something flickered across Mary's face, perhaps envy, perhaps regret. Congratulations." "Why are you here?" Clara asked, addressing her father. "You made it clear I was no longer your concern when you traded me to settle a debt." Thomas had the grace to look ashamed. "We thought, that is, if you're having a child now, perhaps you'd want family." "I have family," Clara interrupted. "A husband who loves me, friends who support me, and soon, our child. That's all the family I need." Ruth's face flushed. "You ungrateful girl. After all we did." "What did you do?" Clara's voice rose, months of suppressed hurt spilling out. "You called me worthless, damaged goods, a burden to be disposed of. You shipped me off like unwanted livestock to the first man who'd take me." "We did what was best," Thomas started. "You did what was easiest," Jonas corrected. "You couldn't see Clara's worth beyond her womb, so you threw her away. Your loss became my gain."
The baby kicked hard, as if protesting the stress. Clara winced, hand moving to her side. Clara Jonas was instantly attentive. "Do you need to sit?" "I'm fine," she assured him, but allowed him to guide her to the porch steps. Her family watched this tender interaction with varying expressions. Thomas looked thoughtful, Mary wistful, and Ruth looked calculating. "Well," Ruth said with forced brightness, "since there's to be a grandchild, perhaps we should discuss arrangements. The child will need proper guidance, education. We could—" "No," Clara's voice was steel. "You'll have no part in this child's life." "You can't mean that," Mary protested. "We're family?" "We're family," Clara corrected. "Family doesn't abandon each other. Family doesn't trade daughters for gambling debts. Family doesn't call a woman worthless because her body works differently." "Now see here," Thomas blustered. "The lady has spoken," Jonas said with finality. "I'll ask you to leave now. Don't come back." Ruth's mask finally slipped, showing her true colors. "You'll regret this, Clara. When that baby comes out wrong. When you realize you can't manage. Get off my land." Jonas's voice was deadly quiet. "Now, and if you ever speak ill of my wife or child again, you'll answer to me." The threat in his tone was unmistakable. Thomas quickly helped Ruth remount, though Mary lingered. "Clara," she said softly, "I'm sorry for everything. I hope you'll be happy." Clara studied her sister's face, seeing genuine regret there. "I'm happy, Mary, happier than I ever thought possible. I hope you find the same someday." Mary nodded, tears in her eyes, and followed their parents. Clara watched them go, feeling a chapter of her life close definitively. "Are you all right?" Jonas asked, sitting beside her on the steps. "Better than all right." Clara realized with some surprise, "I thought seeing them would hurt more, but mostly I just feel free." "They don't deserve you," Jonas said fiercely. "They never did." Clara leaned into him, feeling the baby settle after its earlier protests. "I used to think I needed their approval, their love, but you taught me I was already enough." "You taught yourself that," Jonas corrected. "I just helped you see it." They sat together watching the dust settle from her family's departure. The confrontation, rather than upsetting Clara further, seemed to have lifted a weight from her shoulders. She'd faced her past and chosen her future. Over the following weeks, Clara noticed a shift in how the townspeople treated her. Word of her family's visit and Jonas's fierce protection spread quickly. Combined with her visible pregnancy, it seemed to finally put to rest the old whispers about the barren woman. Dr. Hawkins continued his careful monitoring, pleased with Clara's progress. "The baby's in perfect position," he announced after one examination. "Strong heartbeat, good movement. You're doing wonderfully. Clara." "Truly?" she asked, needing reassurance. "Everything is normal." "Better than normal," he smiled. "This baby seems determined to prove everyone wrong about you. I predict a smooth delivery and a healthy child." Jonas gripped Clara's hand tightly at this news. They'd both been afraid to voice their deepest fears, that something would go wrong, that the miracle would be snatched away. But with each passing day, their child grew stronger, and their hope grew with it. One evening, as Clara worked on a baby blanket, Jonas surprised her with a question. "Have you thought about names?" She looked up, smiling. Have you? If it's a boy, I'd like to name him after my father. William. William Halden. Clara tested. "I like it. And for a girl—" Jonas was quiet for a moment. "Hope, like your calf." Clara's eyes filled with tears. "Hope. Yes, that's perfect." "Because that's what you brought back to my life." Jonas continued softly. "Hope for something better. Hope for love again. hope for a future I'd stopped believing in. Clara set aside her sewing and moved carefully to sit in his lap, a feat made more challenging by her size. "You gave me the same," she whispered. "When everyone said I was worthless, you saw my worth. When I believed I was broken, you loved me whole." They kissed tenderly, the baby rolling between them as if wanting to be part of the moment. As her time drew nearer, Clara found herself nesting with newfound energy. She cleaned everything twice, organized and reorganized the nursery, and cooked enough meals to stock the cold storage for weeks. "You need to rest," Jonas fretted, finding her scrubbing floors on her hands and knees. "I can't," Clara laughed, letting him help her up. "There's so much to do before the baby comes." "Everything's ready," he assured her. "The cradle's waiting, clothes are made. Doctor, Hawkins is on alert. All we need now is for this little one to decide it's time." That night, Clara stood before the mirror in their bedroom, studying her transformed body. The woman looking back bore little resemblance to the broken creature who'd arrived at the ranch over a year ago. This woman glowed with health and happiness, her body full with new life. Jonas appeared behind her, wrapping his arms around her expanded waist. "Beautiful," he murmured, pressing a kiss to her neck. "I'm enormous," Clara protested, though she smiled. "You're perfect." His hands spanned her belly reverently. "I never thought I'd see this again, my wife carrying my child. It's a miracle. Clara, you're a miracle." The baby kicked against his palms, and they both laughed. "I think someone agrees," Clara said, as they prepared for bed. Clara felt a strange mix of anticipation and peace. Soon, their child would arrive. Soon, she would hold the baby she'd thought she'd never have. The fear was still there, lurking at the edges, but it was overwhelmed by joy and determination. "Promise me something," she said as Jonas pulled her close in bed. "Anything, if something goes wrong." "Clara, don't." "Listen," she insisted. "If something goes wrong, promise me you'll tell our child how much they were wanted, how much they were loved before they even drew breath." "Nothing will go wrong," Jonas said firmly. "But yes, I promise. Though you'll be here to tell them yourself." Clara hoped he was right, as she drifted off to sleep, the baby quiet for once. She sent up a prayer of gratitude for Jonas, who'd seen her as more than her supposed defect, for the child growing within her, defying all expectations, for second chances and unexpected miracles. Whatever came next, she would face it with the strength born of surviving rejection and finding love. She was no longer the discarded woman who'd arrived at the ranch in despair. She was Clara Halden, wife, soon-to-be mother, and living proof that sometimes the most beautiful gardens grow in soil once thought barren. The moon rose full and bright over the ranch, bathing everything in silver light. Inside the house, two hearts beat as one, while a third tiny heart kept rhythm between them, counting down to the moment when hope would become reality. Clara's labor began on a clear May morning, just as the sun painted the eastern sky in shades of rose and gold. She had risen to start breakfast when the first pain gripped her, stealing her breath. The skillet clattered to the floor. "Jonas!" she gasped, gripping the edge of the table. He was there in seconds, taking in her pale face and the way she hunched forward. "Is it time?" "I think, yes." Another pain rolled through her, stronger than the first. "The baby's coming." Jonas's face went white, then set with determination. "I'll fetch Dr. Hawkins. Will you be all right for a few minutes?" Clara nodded, though fear clawed at her throat. This was the moment she'd both yearned for and dreaded. "Hurry," she whispered. Jonas kissed her fiercely, then ran for his horse. Clara heard him galloping away and slowly made her way to their bedroom, pausing twice as contractions seized her. She'd helped with births before, knew what to expect, but experiencing it herself was entirely different. By the time Jonas returned with Dr. Hawkins and, surprisingly, Mrs. Douglas. Clara was gripping the bedpost, her nightgown soaked with sweat. "How far apart are the pains, Doctor?" Hawkins asked, immediately taking charge. 5 minutes, maybe less," Clara panted. Good, good. First babies usually take their time, but yours seems eager." He turned to Jonas. "Boil water, lots of it, and clean linens." "I'll help Clara," Mrs. Douglas said firmly. "Had 4 of my own, I know what she needs." The next hours blurred together in a haze of pain and determination. Clara squeezed Mrs. Douglas's hand through each contraction while the woman murmured encouragement. Jonas paced outside the door, his footsteps marking time like a clock. "You're doing wonderfully." "Doctor," Hawkins assured her as the sun climbed toward noon. "The baby's positioned perfectly. Just keep breathing." But as afternoon wore on, Clara's strength began to flag. The pains were constant now, each one threatening to tear her apart. Doubt crept in with exhaustion. "I can't," she sobbed after a particularly brutal contraction. "I'm too old, too weak. They were right about me." "Don't you dare," Mrs. Douglas said sharply. "You saved my boy. You're the strongest woman I know. You can do this." Clara Jonas's voice came through the door, raw with worry. "Let him in," Clara gasped. "Please, I need him." "Doctor," Hawkins hesitated, then nodded. Jonas burst through the door, his face haggard. He took Clara's hand, and she gripped it like a lifeline. "I'm here," he said, voice breaking. "I'm right here, my love." "I'm scared," Clara admitted. "What if something's wrong? What if I can't?" "Look at me," Jonas commanded gently. When she met his eyes, he continued. "You've already done the impossible. You've carried our child when everyone said you couldn't. You're going to bring this baby into the world, and I'll be right here beside you." "Doctor," Hawkins checked her progress again. "Clara, it's time. With the next pain, I need you to push." Terror and anticipation warred in Clara's chest. This was the moment that would prove whether the miracle was complete or if cruel fate would snatch it away. She looked at Jonas, drawing strength from his steady presence. The next contraction built like a wave. Clara bore down with everything she had, a primal sound tearing from her throat. Jonas supported her shoulders, murmuring encouragement. "Again, Doctor," Hawkins instructed. "The head's coming." Push after push. Clara worked to bring their child into the world, just when she thought she had nothing left to give. "Doctor," Hawkins exclaimed, "one more. Clara, one more push." With a final superhuman effort, Clara pushed. Then, a sensation of release, followed by the most beautiful sound she'd ever heard her baby's first cry. "It's a girl, Doctor," Hawkins announced, quickly cleaning the infant. "A perfect, healthy girl." Clara sobbed as the doctor placed the squalling bundle on her chest. Tiny fists waved in protest, the baby's face red and scrunched with displeasure at being evicted from her warm home. "Hope," Clara whispered, tears streaming down her face. "Our little Hope." Jonas was crying too, reaching out with trembling fingers to touch his daughter's downy head. "She's perfect. God in heaven, she's perfect." The baby's cries quieted as she nestled against Clara's skin, instinctively seeking comfort. Clara had never felt anything like the rush of love that consumed her in that moment. Every year of heartache, every cruel word, every moment of despair, it all led to this perfect instant. "You did it," Jonas murmured, kissing Clara's damp forehead. "You amazing, incredible woman. You did it." While Dr. Hawkins tended to the afterbirth and Mrs. Douglas cleaned up, Clara and Jonas marveled at their daughter. Hope had a shock of dark hair like her father and what promised to be her mother's stubborn chin. Her eyes, when she briefly opened them, were the slate blue of all newborns. 10 fingers, 10 toes, Jonas counted softly. Listen to those lungs when she cries. That's a strong baby. Like her mother, Mrs., Douglas said, smiling as she helped Clara into a fresh nightgown. This little one's a fighter, just like you. Word of Hope's arrival spread through Cedar Creek like wildfire. By evening, the porch was crowded with offerings. Food, baby clothes, carved toys. Even some who'd been coldest to Clara sent congratulations. Seems a baby changes things, Jonas observed, carrying in another basket of goods. Clara, nursing Hope for the first time, smiled tiredly. Let them think what they want. I have everything I need right here. But the real test came 3 days later when Clara felt strong enough to have visitors. The first to arrive was Reverend Thompson, come to offer blessings. He held Hope with practiced ease, smiling down at her sleeping face. God works in mysterious ways, he said softly. This child is proof that his timing is perfect, even when we don't understand it. Throughout the day, visitors came and went. Mrs. Patterson brought her finest baby bonnet, the banker's wife, who'd never spoken to Clara before, cooed over Hope's tiny features. Even crusty old Mr. Jameson from the feed store sent his regards. Then, late in the afternoon, Miriam Crowley appeared at the door. Jonas tensed, ready to send her away, but Clara placed a hand on his arm. Let her in, she said quietly. Miriam entered hesitantly, her usual arrogance replaced by something almost humble. She approached the bed where Clara held Hope, her eyes fixed on the baby. May I see her? Clara adjusted the blanket so Miriam could see Hope's peaceful face. The woman stared for a long moment, then spoke in a voice Clara had never heard from her. She's beautiful. Miriam's eyes filled with tears. I owe you an apology, Clara. The things I said, the way I treated you, it was wrong, cruel. Clara studied her former tormentor, seeing pain she'd never noticed before. Why, Miriam, why were you so determined to hurt me? Miriam's facade crumbled entirely. Because you reminded me of myself. 3 miscarriages before I had my son, years of feeling broken, worthless. When I saw you, I saw my own pain, and I couldn't bear it. It was easier to be cruel than to remember. Clara felt her anger dissolve into pity. I'm sorry for your losses. Don't be kind to me, Miriam said brokenly. I don't deserve it. I just wanted to say, I was wrong. You were never broken. And this baby proves what I should have known. Sometimes miracles take time. She fled before Clara could respond, leaving behind a small knitted blanket. Well, Jonas said after a moment, that was unexpected. Pain makes people do terrible things, Clara said softly, looking down at Hope. I pray our daughter never knows that kind of pain. As if in response, Hope opened her eyes and yawned, tiny fist escaping her swaddle. Clara's heart swelled with love so fierce it almost frightened her. Over the following days, Clara recovered with remarkable speed. Doctor. Hawkins attributed it to her determination and Jonas's devoted care, but Clara knew it was more than that. She'd waited so long for this little one. She wasn't about to miss a moment. Hope proved to be an easy baby, nursing well and sleeping in reasonable stretches. Jonas was utterly besotted, often found just staring at his daughter with wonder. Never thought I'd have this again, he confessed one night as they lay together, Hope sleeping between them in the bed. A family, a future. Neither did I, Clara admitted. I'd resigned myself to being the tragic figure everyone pitied or scorned. Now look at us. No looking back, Jonas said firmly. Only forward. 2 weeks after Hope's birth. Clara felt strong enough to venture to town. She dressed carefully, settled Hope in the sling Mrs. Douglas had given her, and climbed into the wagon beside Jonas. Their appearance on Main Street caused quite a stir. People stopped to admire the baby, to congratulate the new parents. Clara held her head high. no longer the broken woman who'd slunk through town avoiding eyes. At Patterson's store, Mrs. Patterson herself came around the counter to peek at Hope. "Oh, she's just perfect. Clara, what a blessing." "Yes," Clara agreed simply. "She is." They were loading supplies when Samuel Morrison appeared. Clara's blood ran cold at the sight of her former husband. She hadn't seen him since he'd returned her to her parents like defective goods. Samuel's eyes went immediately to the baby, his face cycling through disbelief, anger, and something that might have been regret. "Clara," he said stiffly, "I heard rumors, but didn't believe them." Jonas stepped protectively closer to his family. "Hard to accept you were wrong?" Samuel flushed. "I was told by doctors—" "The doctors were wrong," Clara interrupted, finding her voice. "Or perhaps the problem was never with me." The implication hung in the air. Samuel's new wife. Clara had heard remained childless after 2 years of marriage. His face darkened, but before he could speak, Hope began to fuss. "Excuse me," Clara said coolly. "My daughter needs me." She turned away, soothing Hope with practiced ease. Behind her, she heard Jonas speak low and dangerous. "You threw away a treasure because of your pride and ignorance. That's your loss to live with. But you'll speak to my wife with respect. Or not at all." Samuel muttered something and retreated. Clara felt a decade-old weight lift from her shoulders. Facing him while holding her daughter in her arms was the final proof she needed. She was not the failure he'd named her. "Are you all right?" Jonas asked as they drove home. More than all right, Clara realized. For years, I believed his words, believed I was cursed, broken, less than a real woman. But look at me now, wife to a man who truly loves me, mother to this perfect child. He has no power over me anymore." Hope cooed as if in agreement, and Jonas reached over to squeeze Clara's hand. That night, as Clara rocked Hope to sleep, she thought about the journey that had brought her here, the pain of rejection, the shame of being labeled barren, the despair of being cast off by her family. It had all led to this moment, sitting in a handmade rocking chair, holding the child she'd thought impossible. "Your story isn't what I planned," she whispered to Hope. "But it's perfect just the same. You'll grow up knowing you were desperately wanted, fiercely loved. You'll never doubt your worth." Jonas appeared in the doorway, watching his girls with soft eyes. "Both of you will always know your worth," he said. "I'll make sure of it." Clara smiled, lifting her face for his kiss. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. A baby to raise, a ranch to run, a community to continue winning over. But tonight, in this room filled with love and possibility, Clara finally understood the truth she had never been broken. She'd simply been waiting for the right soil in which to bloom. Hope slept on, tiny chest rising and falling, blissfully unaware that her very existence had rewritten her mother's story from tragedy to triumph. And in the soft lamplight, surrounded by the family she'd built from the ashes of her old life, Clara whispered a prayer of gratitude for the winding path that had led her home. The harvest festival arrived with Hope now 6 months old, a chubby, laughing baby who had her father wrapped around her tiny finger. Clara dressed her daughter in a beautiful white dress with delicate embroidery, a gift from the church ladies who had once whispered behind their hands about the barren woman. "Ready to show off our girl?" Jonas asked, adjusting his best shirt. He'd shaved carefully and even pomaded his hair, looking younger than his years. "As ready as I'll ever be," Clara replied, though butterflies danced in her stomach. This would be Hope's first major public appearance, their first festival as a complete family. The town square buzzed with activity, booths selling preserves and pies, children running between the haystacks, fiddle music floating on the autumn air. Clara had barely stepped down from the wagon when Mrs. Douglas appeared, arms outstretched. "There's my little angel and her angel mother." She beamed at Hope, who gurgled happily in response. "Tommy's been asking about the baby all week." Indeed, Young Tommy Douglas ran up, standing on tiptoes to peer at Hope. "She's little," he observed solemnly, "but pretty." "Thank you, Tommy," Clara said, her heart warming. This boy, whose life she'd saved now, looked at her daughter with such innocent admiration. Throughout the day, people approached to admire Hope, to congratulate the parents, to share their own stories. Even those who had been coolest before seemed charmed by the baby's gummy smiles and reaching hands. "She has your eyes. Old Mrs.," Henderson observed, peering closely at Hope. "And Jonas's stubborn chin. She'll be a beauty." Clara thanked her, marveling at how different this felt from her trips to town just a year ago. Then she'd been the subject of pity and scorn. Now she was simply another mother, showing off her child at the Harvest Festival. The transformation was completed when Mayor Garrett approached their picnic blanket. "Mrs. Halden, Mr. Halden," he said formally. "I wonder if I might have a word." Jonas tensed, protective as always, but the mayor's expression was kind. "I wanted to personally thank you, Mrs. Halden, for your heroic actions in saving the Douglas boy. I know I'm months late, but better late than never." He cleared his throat. "I also wanted to apologize for how some in our community treated you when you first arrived. It was unchristian and unkind." Clara blinked in surprise. "Thank you, Mayor, that means a great deal." "The town council has voted to present you with this." He produced a small wooden plaque. "A commendation for bravery and selfless service to our community." Clara accepted the plaque with trembling hands, reading the inscription through tears. Jonas's arm came around her shoulders, solid and supportive. "Furthermore," the mayor continued, "we'd like to invite you to join the Ladies' Aid Society. Your courage and compassion are exactly what our community organizations need." I would be honored," Clara managed. After the mayor left, Clara sat in stunned silence. The Ladies' Aid Society was the pinnacle of respectability in Cedar Creek. Former members had included the banker's wife, the doctor's mother, the most established women in town. From outcast to pillar of the community, Jonas murmured with satisfaction, "Though you were always a pillar to me." As the sun began to set, the dancing started. Jonas surprised Clara by standing and offering his hand. "I don't really dance," he warned. "Neither do I." Clara laughed, passing Hope to Mrs. Douglas, who was delighted to hold her. "We'll muddle through together." They joined the other couples in a simple country dance. Jonas's hands warm and sure as he guided her through the steps. Clara felt like she was floating, her heart so full it might burst. "People are watching," she whispered as they turned. "Let them," Jonas replied. "Let them see how a man dances with the woman he adores." As if to emphasize the point, he spun her out and back, earning appreciative applause from onlookers. Clara laughed, feeling young and carefree in a way she hadn't since her early marriage. When the dance ended, they were both breathless and grinning. Hope had fallen asleep in Mrs. Douglas's arms, her tiny face peaceful in the lantern light. "Thank you," the older woman said as she transferred the sleeping baby back to Clara, "for saving my Tommy, for being an inspiration, for showing us all that God's plans aren't always what we expect." As the Haldens prepared to leave, Miriam Crowley approached once more. She'd kept her distance all day, but now she stepped forward with obvious determination. "Clara," she said quietly, "I wanted you to know I've told everyone who would listen how wrong I was about you, how wrong we all were. You're twice the woman any of us are. We all make mistakes," Clara said gently. "What matters is learning from them." Miriam's eyes filled with tears. "You're kinder than I deserve. I hope someday we might be friends." "I'd like that," Clara said, and meant it. Life was too short for holding grudges, and she'd learned that hurt people often hurt others. The ride home was quiet. Hope sleeping in Clara's arms, the wagon creaking rhythmically. The full moon lit their way, turning the familiar road into something magical. "Did today really happen?" Clara asked softly. "The commendation, the Ladies' Aid Society, people actually wanting to be near us?" "It happened," Jonas assured her. "You've won them over completely, though I knew you would from the start. You had more faith in me than I had in myself." "No," Jonas corrected. "I just saw what was always there. Your strength, your kindness, your incredible heart. Others needed more time to see it, but it was never in doubt to me." Back at the ranch, they put Hope in her cradle and prepared for bed. Clara stood at the window, looking out at the land that had become home. 1.5 years ago, she'd arrived here broken and discarded. Now, she was whole in ways she'd never imagined possible. "What are you thinking?" Jonas asked, coming up behind her. "About circles," Clara said thoughtfully. "How life moves in circles. My family sent me here as a cruel joke. The infertile daughter to the widowed rancher. They thought they were getting rid of a burden." "Their loss," Jonas said firmly. "But the joke was on them, wasn't it?" Clara turned in his arms. "Because I found love here, purpose, and against all odds, the child they said I'd never have. I came here with nothing and gained everything." "We both did," Jonas reminded her. "I was just existing before you came, going through the motions, convinced I'd had my chance at happiness and lost it. You brought me back to life, Clara." They stood together in the moonlight, holding each other close. In her cradle, Hope stirred and made small sleeping sounds, the sound of promise, of future, of dreams made real. "Should we write to them?" Jonas asked suddenly. "Your family tell them about Hope." Clara considered for a moment, then shook her head. "No. They made their choice when they traded me away. Hope will grow up surrounded by people who choose to love her, not those who see family as obligations or burdens." "You're right," Jonas agreed. "Our daughter will know nothing but love and acceptance." The next morning brought a stream of visitors, neighbors dropping by with congratulations on Clara's commendation and gifts for Hope. The house that had once been so isolated now rang with laughter and conversation. Among the visitors was a surprise. Reverend Thompson, accompanied by a young couple Clara didn't recognize. "This is James and Sarah Mitchell," the Reverend explained. "They're new to town, and Sarah is, well..." "We've been trying for a baby for 3 years," Sarah said quietly, her pain evident. Reverend Thompson thought, that is, he said you might understand. Clara's heart went out to the young woman. She saw herself in Sarah's haunted eyes, the familiar ache of empty arms. "Come in," Clara said warmly. "Let's have some tea and talk." Over the next hour, Clara shared her story, the years of heartache, the cruel labels, the journey to unexpected joy. Sarah wept openly, clutching her husband's hand. "There's hope then," she whispered. "Even when everyone says there isn't." "There's always hope," Clara said firmly. "It might not come in the form you expect. For me, it took a new start. A man who saw my worth beyond my womb. And yes, eventually, this little miracle." She adjusted Hope on her lap. "But even if Hope hadn't come, I would still have found happiness, because I learned my value isn't determined by what my body can or cannot do." "Thank you," James Mitchell said, his voice rough. "People don't understand what this does to a marriage, to a person's soul." "I understand," Clara said simply. "And you're always welcome here, both of you." After they left, Jonas found Clara in the nursery, rocking Hope and humming softly. "That was a kind thing you did," he said, "sharing your pain to ease theirs." "Someone should have done it for me." Clara replied, "Maybe my journey would have been easier if I'd known I wasn't alone." "You're creating the support you wished you'd had," Jonas observed. "That's the mark of true character." As autumn deepened toward winter, Clara found herself at the center of a growing circle. Women sought her advice, her comfort, her understanding. The ranch became a gathering place for those who needed a listening ear and a compassionate heart. One evening, as snow began to fall, Jonas watched Clara hosting a group of women from town. Hope played at her feet while Clara poured tea and offered quiet wisdom to a young wife struggling with her mother-in-law's criticism. "You've built something beautiful here," he told her later, after the women had gone. "A community, a place of healing." "We built it," Clara corrected. "Your steady presence, your protection, your love, they gave me the foundation to stand on." Christmas approached with the ranch transformed. Where once it had been a lonely outpost, now it bloomed with warmth and connection. The Ladies' Aid Society met there monthly, Clara's gentle leadership helping to shift their focus from gossip to genuine service. On Christmas Eve, as snow fell softly outside, the Halden house was full of light and laughter. The Douglas family had joined them for dinner, along with the Mitchells and even Miriam Crowley and her husband. The house rang with conversation and joy. "A toast," Jonas announced, raising his glass, "to second chances, to families found in unexpected ways, to love that sees beyond circumstances, to the heart within. To Clara, Mrs. Douglas added, who showed us all what real strength looks like." Clara blushed as glasses raised in her direction. "To all of us," she countered, "for choosing kindness over judgment, love over fear." As the evening wound down and guests departed into the snowy night, Clara tucked Hope into her cradle. The baby grabbed her finger, holding tight with surprising strength. "Your story began with sorrow," Clara whispered to her daughter. "But look how it's unfolding, surrounded by love, welcomed by community. Proof that miracles happen when we least expect them." Jonas joined them, his arms encircling both his girls. "What a difference 18 months makes," he mused. "From that scared woman standing in my yard to this, the heart of our home, the soul of our community." From joke to joy, Clara said softly, "My family thought they were discarding something worthless. Instead, they gave us the greatest gift, each other." As they prepared for bed, Clara reflected on the journey that had brought them here. The pain hadn't been erased. It had been transformed into compassion. The rejection hadn't been forgotten. It had been redeemed by acceptance. The barren years hadn't been wasted. They had prepared her to appreciate the abundance that followed. "Merry Christmas, my love," Jonas whispered as they settled into bed. "Merry Christmas," Clara replied, listening to Hope's soft breathing from the cradle nearby. "Our first of many." Outside, snow continued to fall, blanketing the ranch in pristine white. But inside, warmth reigned. The warmth of family chosen and cherished, of love hard-won and deeply treasured, of hope fulfilled in ways beyond imagining. The woman who'd arrived as a cast-off had become a cornerstone. The joke had become a testament to the power of resilience, love, and faith in life's unexpected blessings, and in a cradle carved with loving hands, Hope slept peacefully, unaware that her very existence had rewritten the narrative of shame into one of triumph. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I'd love to know where you're listening from. Please share in the comments below so we can connect and exchange thoughts about Clara's incredible journey. If you enjoyed this tale of love, resilience, and redemption in the Old West, please subscribe to my channel, Wild West Night. Give this video a like, and don't forget to hit the hype button to help more people discover these heartwarming stories.